Some bands achieved mainstream success early in their careers and built a legendary reputation and legacy off the back of that. Other bands did things differently. They didn't shift millions of records or play to sold-out arenas. But they did achieve legendary status all the same, with devoted cult followings and real adulations from fans. In this video, I'm looking at 7 of those bands who released iconic albums and influenced the scene, and yet never got the wider recognition they deserved. Here are 7 cult classic pop-punk and emo bands you need to know about. Hailing from Teaneck, New Jersey, Armor for Sleep existed in an uncertain position in the emo scene. Not quite big enough to take a seat at the top table, but certainly not scene outsiders. AFS were kind of caught between two worlds. They came closest to joining the emo big leagues in 2005 with their second album, What to Do When You're Dead. A concept record charting one man's journey to the afterlife following a tragic suicide. The album featured Car Underwater, one of the biggest rock tracks of 2005, and a great addition to that mid-noughties emo canon. The success of WTDWYD landed them a major label deal with Sire, and their third album, Smile for Them, followed in 2007. Despite gaining better reviews than its predecessor, the major label debut just didn't resonate with emo kids the same way, and the band broke up a couple of years later. The band have got back together a bunch of times since, often for anniversary tours celebrating What to Do When You're Dead. It's the 20th anniversary this year, in fact. They even released a new album in 2022 entitled The Rain Museum, a superbly eerie, dreamy record, with enough mathy screamo sections to keep old school fans happy. It seems like Armor for Sleep are still at the top of their game. So why did they never become as big as MCR? Why was WTDWYD not as big as 3 Cheers? Well, who knows? There's not much room up there on that pedestal, and MCR, with their gothy theatrics and high drama, just suited the limelight a bit more. Instead, Armor for Sleep are cult heroes, and that's exactly where they belong. Named after Ernest Hemingway's posthumously released book about bullfighting, The Dangerous Summer were smart and literate enough to slot right into that realistic pop-punk scene of the 2010s. But they were also out to do their own thing, with debut album Reach for the Sun and follow-up Warpaint. They showed how emotional storytelling and sharp songwriting could unite the world of indie rock, emotional post-hardcore, and pop-punk. And yet, somehow, The Dangerous Summer never quite blew up. They released 3 albums on Hopeless Records, and while label mates like The Wonder Years and Silverstein used this as a springboard to success, it didn't work in the same way for TDS. The band broke up in 2014, and everything seemed to be finished when guitarist and backing vocalist Cody Payne found himself locked up after a burglary conviction. But amazingly, it wasn't finished. The Dangerous Summer got back together, without Payne, in 2017. These days they seem to have settled into their position as cult favorites, with a strong and committed core of die-hard fans. Had things gone differently back in the early 2010s, The Dangerous Summer could have been huge. Perhaps if Hopeless had pushed them a little harder. Or if they'd chosen different album tracks as singles. Or maybe if their music had appeared on the soundtrack to a good movie, rather than the Jennifer Aniston and Aaron Eckhart vehicle Love Happens. Things might have been different. Or maybe not. Some bands are just better suited as cult legends, and I feel like The Dangerous Summer fit quite nicely into this category. Pianist Greta Salpeter was only in 7th grade in Urbana, Illinois when she met fellow musician Bob Morris. Shortly after this, the two decided to form a band, writing a bunch of songs in just a few months. Adding Chris Fowler and Darren Wilson to their lineup, the Hush sound was complete. But without a label or distributor, what were they going to do? This didn't matter. They recorded their first album, So Sudden anyway, selling that record any way they could. The band obviously had drive and vision, and they had a pretty good live show too. They were also existing in a new age for bands and artists, the digital age. All this combined to get the Hush sound the break they deserved. It was Panic at the Disco's Ryan Ross who first stumbled across the Hush Sounds page on Pure Volume. Ryan told his label boss all about the band from Illinois, and that label boss was fellow Illinoisian Pete Wentz. The Fall Out Boy bassist wasted no time. He signed the Hush sound up to his Decadence label, re-releasing So Sudden, and then putting out second album Like Vines in 2006. It all sounds a little bit similar to Panic at the Disco's own story from one of my other videos, to be honest. Panic were a young band with little live experience, but they'd recorded music that caught the attention of Pete Wentz. Off the back of that, they landed a deal, and the rest is history. So why don't we talk about the Hush sound in the same breath as Panic? Well, firstly, the Hush sound didn't stick around so long. They released one more album on Decadence, 2008's Goodbye Blues. And then the band fell apart as members went to pursue other things. Secondly, the music. The music was great, but it didn't hit that mid-2000s emo zeitgeist like Panic at the Disco did. The Hush sound were almost too emo for the folk scene, too pop-punk for the indie scene, and yet too folky and indie to fit in anywhere else. While they put out 3 great albums and made some stunning music, the band were square pegs in round holes wherever they went. This means they never quite translated all that talent into mainstream appeal. But it does make them perfect for this Cult Heroes list. Daphne Loves Derby were one of the first bands to really explode over social media. Back in 2001, the Washington State indie emo rockers were Pure Volume's top unsigned artists, becoming the first band to rack up over 1 million plays on the platform. When MySpace emerged a couple of years later, the band built a huge following there too. And all that internet buzz eventually landed Daphne Loves Derby a deal with Outlook Records. Daphne Loves Derby were kind of the perfect band for those times. They blend the indie alt-rock flavor of 90s emo with the bouncier, pop-punk influenced stuff of the early 2000s. I actually think this is a band that's due a resurgence. I feel like the whole vibe of tracks like Hammers and Hearts from 2005's On the Strength of All Concerned would go down really well with the younger generation.
So much for birthday wishes. I've been too busy with that memory. What does it take to believe in all the things you've left me with such a silent world. The evenings are calm, but They
scored their biggest hit with 2007's Goodnight, Witness Light, an album seemingly inspired in equal parts by the poetry of Robert Frost and the Jim Carrey movie The Truman Show. People seem to love unpicking the tangle of references and influences the band poured into their songs, and the album was a big critical success too. But then, everything ground to a halt. The band teased that they were releasing another album, but that next album didn't come. There were rumors of solo projects, of academic commitments, of life just getting in the way, and slowly the band faded from view. Actually, not quite. In 2001, Daphne Loves Derby finally released that follow-up album, Flesh and Fears. It's a superb record, reminiscent of latter-day Death Cab for Cutie, but with a sort of desert alt-rock twist. Was it worth the wait? Maybe, but let's hope the band don't keep us waiting another 14 years for the next one. Valencia first emerged onto the Philadelphia pop-punk scene in 2004. Like The Dangerous Summer, these guys have a literary backstory too, having taken their name from the wife of main character Billy Pilgrim in the Kurt Vonnegut novel Slaughterhouse-Five. Tragedy would dog the band almost from the very beginning. After releasing their first album, This Could Be a Possibility, to rave reviews in 2005, the band headed out on tour. But they were forced to cancel the remaining dates after singer Shane Henderson's girlfriend, Dana Leigh Burrell, passed away in a freak accident at the age of 18. Traumatized by Dana's horrific death, Henderson decided to pour his heartbreak into his songwriting, resulting in the band's wonderful major label debut, We All Need a Reason to Believe, in 2008.
So can you remember sitting by I get a little down on myself, but when you've been around, I know what felt new. We felt alive, both through the bad
Disenchanted with the idea of major label life, the band returned to the indie world in 2010 and put out third album Dancing with a Ghost on I Surrender Records. Another excellent album. The warm response to Dancing with a Ghost encouraged Valencia to get out on the road again, but the band was beginning to fall apart. Guitarist J.D. Perry left the band in June 2011, and tragedy would rear its ugly head again in September, when former drummer Maxim Soria lost his life in a motorcycle accident. The band got back together in 2016 and are still together today. They dropped a couple of singles here and there, and they tour plenty, but we're yet to see a new album. Maybe the fact that they've never recorded a follow-up to Dancing with a Ghost has helped to reinforce their well-deserved cult hero status. Florida's Between the Trees made melodic, delicately poised emo indie rock, and they did it better than most. Releasing debut album The Story and the Song through Bonded Records in 2006, the band received a lot of attention for their great tunes and positive message. Tracks like The Way She Feels and White Lines and Red Lights put the band on the map, while their involvement with the non-profit mental health and addiction charity To Write Love on Her Arms showed the world what Between the Trees were all about. This was a band who cared, who wanted to make a difference. It seemed like that first album was the platform the band needed. In 2007, the news broke that they'd been signed by Universal, but this deal sadly fell through before the band could record their follow-up. So, when it finally emerged in 2009, Between the Trees' second album, entitled Spain, was released on Bonded, so it didn't get the major label push perhaps the guys were expecting. Between the Trees was also undergoing some big lineup changes. Guitarist Brad Kriebel left before Spain was released, replaced initially by Josh Love. Then keyboardist Wes Anderson announced that he wasn't happy with the creative direction of the band, and he left too. The final lineup of Ryan Kirkland, Jeremy and Josh Butler, and Stevie Benz, who had replaced Love, toured throughout the winter of 09 and 10, even recording and distributing the Winter EP to mark the occasion. But it was very much the final act of the band's career. In a long and heartfelt statement released on MySpace in 2010, the band announced that it was all over. The Between the Trees adventure had come to an end. Those two albums, though, were strong enough to land BTT a spot on this list of cult classic bands. Formed in Long Island in 2004, Envy on the Coast followed in the footsteps of fellow New Yorkers Glassjaw and Seattle experimentalists Blood Brothers. Combining the weight of hardcore with a chaotic disco-esque groove, Envy on the Coast were beloved by plenty of fans in the mid-2000s. But they never quite scored the wider recognition they deserved, despite sharing stages with megastars like Tom DeLonge's Angels and Airwaves and Jared Leto's 30 Seconds to Mars. So what happened here? To find out, let's take a look at the band's biggest record, 2007's Lucy Gray. On Lucy Gray, you've got a swirling whirlwind of different influences colliding together. Album opener Sugar Skulls is a hot heat style dance punk number, with a heavy dose of screamo and some stadium rock choruses.
So tell them honest to wait at the gate. This isn't natural. With every breath and every intake, tiptoe further away. Our eyes are paralyzed, that's your legs are canonized.
On X Amount of Truth, horrifying industrial noise and radio static collides with what sounds like a gentle church choir. Vultures brings extreme math rock in the style of The Fall of Troy or Ed Gein, but layers it with melodic vocals. Basically, the guys in Envy of the Coast are throwing everything into the pot here. So, is this chaotic and scattergun approach to music the reason? Is this why the band won lots of famous friends, but never broke through to broader appeal? Maybe. Being experimental isn't really the kiss of death for bands. Back in those days, genre collisions were everywhere, and bands like He Is Legend, Idiot Pilot, Enter Shikari, Head Atomica, and Panic at the Disco made solid careers out of mixing and matching their influences. But perhaps with Envy, that mixing and matching was all just a little too head-spinning. Just when you're getting into the band's math core, they throw a disco punk curveball at you. And when you start getting down with that, they go all screamo on you. It's tough to keep up. That's not to say it's not awesome, and a whole lot of fun. To this day, the band have released 2 full-length albums and 3 EPs, each one quite different from the last. After a hiatus between 2010 and 2016, the band have since returned as a 2-piece, as vocalists Ryan Hunter and Brian Byrne are now flying the Envy flag. Let's see what they come up with next. It's sure to be interesting. What makes for great music? Passion, artistry, human connection. These are the things that make great music resonate with us. It doesn't matter whether an album sells 3 copies or 3 million. The music still has to move us. This is why the idea of the cult classic is so important. These are classic records by every metric. They might not have ruled the charts, but they moved plenty of hearts and made a difference in countless lives. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Not chart positions and record certifications. So, what do you think of my list? Which one of these bands is due for a comeback? Or is there anyone I've missed that you think I should have included? Let's talk about it in the comments. And of course, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more dives into the ever-fascinating world of emo and pop punk.